Welcome to Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. My name is Mompoloki Lerumo Mogobe. Our objective is to enthuse, inspire, energize, and empower entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of all stripes here in BW and beyond. We do so by inviting these entrepreneurs into our makeshift studio. Sometimes we call them to the restaurant, sometimes we go to our studio, and we ask them to share their experiential knowledge, their experiences and their expertise. And we ask them as many questions as we can, aimed at empowering you also as a viewer. Dumelang and welcome once again to another great episode of Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. I'm your host, Mompoloki Lerumo. Always a great pleasure to come to you and share and bring yet another, difference maker, game changer for your listening pleasure and for your, empowerment. And I have today Mr. Batlang MMualefe from the hospitality industry. He'll explain exactly how he maneuvered in that area. My only request before we start is please, try. Hit that subscribe button, and of course do not forget to strike also the notification bell. And let's now welcome Mr. Mualefe to the studio. You're most welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Mogobe.
Yeah,
we appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, it'd be nice if you just share a little bit of your background. You and I have known each other for years, going back maybe decades. Mm-hmm. Share with the listener your academic and work background.
Yeah, thank you very much. As Mr. Mogobe has pointed out, my name is Batlang MMualefe. I come from Lepolole. And yes, back in the days, 80s, I studied at the University of Botswana, Economics and Statistics. And later I proceeded to do my master's in economics in the US, and then I have worked for the Central Bank of Botswana, Ministry of Finance and Development Planning back then, and for the larger part of my career I was with Botswana Development Corporation.
Mm-hmm. Let me understand this. You were trained as an economist?
Yes.
Okay. So you share a profession with former President Lerumo.
Oh yes, that's very true.
Yeah. Now, in terms of BDC, are there any particular projects that you were proud of, that you were part of their configuration or their creation?
Well, yes, there are quite a number of projects, impactful projects that I was directly involved in back in my days with Botswana Development Corporation. I think its contribution to the national economy in those days was quite significant. I have worked in the board of Calabriaries. I have also been the chairman of one company called Commercial Holdings. At the time, I know there is a 15-story development within the fairgrounds. I was the chairperson of the company at the time we put up that development. Well, there are other enterprises, of course, where I played a little role, and the expansion of Cresta Maracanelo, the new premises where Cresta Maracanelo is operating in Mawumu. We were in the board trying to expand the mandate of the corporation and many more.
Yeah. We've spoken about this before, but just for the benefit of the listener, what is the modus operandi? I know you can't speak for them, but I think it's a published public information as to how they operate BDC. For instance, how do they get the return? Giving an example of this 15-story building, for instance.
With this 15-story building, Botswana Development Corporation for short, is a development finance institution. It finances financially viable projects, and therefore it must be seen to be financing primarily projects that generate value for the economy and are sustainable. And the project in question, which is a property project,
it's called what? That building's called?
The
precinct.
Yes, precinct. I remember them 81. I believe the
moved from Moedi to precinct.
Yes, to the precinct. Yes,
precinct.
Yes, it's a 15-story building. Obviously, it generates money through letting office space to businesses, and that is how it is able to generate value for the owner.
Okay.
Yes.
And would BDC normally take a stake or a percentage in projects if they are, for instance, partnering with a private individual? You mentioned the format with Cresta, for instance, where Cresta would be owned primarily in Zimbabwe, am I correct?
Yes, yes, it's partly owned. Initially, it was partly owned by Botswana Development Corporation and yes, Cresta Zimbabwe. But you see, the participation of BDC in any project is subject to the project promoter himself, if he so chooses, because probably they have capital injection challenges. So BDC can always come in as an equity partner in any venture, but it never imposes itself as a partner in any venture.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's talk about your venture, your current venture. What caused you to now say, let me move from employment to self-employment?
You see, I think it's the end process. Unfortunately, in African societies, it tends to be the end process of our career, but ideally it should be otherwise. So when I retired back in 2014, one of the most obvious things was to make assets that I own at that time sweat and generate value for my family. And one of the things that I thought of doing was to set up a domestic guest house, because already we had invested in a house that was suitable for that purpose. So, but we have never looked back. It's a very good business. Yes.
You chose domestic warehousing because when you were in your previous employment, that's just a guess I'm making, you enjoyed hospitality, or when you're sitting in those boards, hospitality was a source of some enjoyment for you.
Yes, yes, there was passion. At the same time, it was very clear that tourism was making an impact in terms of the development process of the country. It was emerging as one of the critical engines of growth. And as you may be aware, one of the drivers of GDP other than diamonds would be tourism. So the hospitality business being part of the tourism industry, I saw it as an emerging opportunity. Yes.
Now, since 2014, you've been running this guest house. Tell us about the journey from 2014 up to now.
Well, I think we must understand this guest house business as a citizen empowerment initiative. Back in the years prior to 2014, it was very difficult for citizens to get into the hospitality business. You and I would agree that it was the big hospitality brands that we knew at that time. Because in order to operate a guest house, you needed something like, for example, an 80-meter access road into your premises. When I think planning authorities knew very well that those internal houses did not exist. So in other ways, really, it was a very difficult situation for Botswana to venture into that. But in an effort to try to boost citizen empowerment, these legislations were eased, and it became fairly easy.
As amended, right?
Yes, as amended. They really worked very hard in creating an enabling environment for the domestic guest houses to thrive. So I think today you can see they are almost a commonplace, to the point of now even threatening the very survival of that particular subsector in itself because of oversupply.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, the plot that you found was originally designated residential. How did you go from residential to guest house? What was involved?
Actually, I think this is one area where the government is doing a very great job, because with the domestic guest house, you don't have to rezone the land, because it operates on residential premises. I'm sure the domestic guest house comes from the concept that back in the days, you build a big house, later the children move out, and then you have idle capacity. So the genius behind this is to allow guests to rent your rooms that are free, so that you improve on the productive capacity of the asset. So without necessarily tampering with the zoning, but of course zoning comes in when maybe you graduate to a commercial guest house, or now you want to turn into a fully fledged hotel. That's when now the requirement is that you must change the status of your land.
Okay.
Yes.
We're still going to go deeper into that, but tell us about what you offer. What is your guest house offer?
The primary product that we offer as MMUAS Suites Executive Guest House is accommodation. But our accommodation is differentiated because of our target market. We're looking at the corporate clients, and yes, and everyone in that space, and therefore we offer what I would term executive accommodation. In addition to that, you'd recall that we are also allowed to provide meals for our guests. But the other area where I think legislation needs to be amended is that we cannot provide meals to non-resident guests, even if we have the capacity to.
Even if guests have come to visit your guests.
Yes, even if you had to come in as my visitor for the day, and the chef is there, I'm paying, I cannot create more value from the food out of selling to non-resident guests. And I believe these are some of the issues that we need to take up with the Department of Tourism.
Define executive. You say you offer executive rooms. What is executive about the rooms?
Well, what is executive about the rooms is primarily that the workspace, because these are corporate, the workspace meaning the desk is much bigger to allow for office work. We offer fastest Wi-Fi. We offer
200 MBs. Oh.
Yes, our Wi-Fi is one of the very fastest.
Okay.
We also, even the television reliability is quite high, and we provide support services where you've booked with us for business, like printing, etc., etc. And then we also provide forecast service to our guests. A forecast service, I think, by the very nature that a domestic guest house takes up to a maximum of 5 rooms. We are able to focus or provide dedicated service to our guests. Yes. So our accommodation facility is also quite premium in terms of aesthetics. Yes.
What can we do to lobby government to, if at all there's something we can do to overcome this limitation of not being able to provide services to non-resident guests?
I believe we really have to come together as a community of guest house owners and lobby government to consider helping us to diversify our sources of income. In short, non-provision of food to non-residents means we cannot operate restaurants. But you and I know that other large facilities do have restaurant facilities. Actually, it doesn't end there. We cannot also offer conferencing facility, even if you have a room big enough to allow for that. Even the curio shops, I don't think they are allowed in terms of the law. You see, these are some of the bottlenecks that I feel have to be dealt with, because an example of a curio shop, for example, we know even in areas like Sussex, we have people who do these beautiful baskets. We should be able to buy them there and create a market where they can be purchased. And domestic houses also are some of the outlets where they can create opportunity for the purchase.
I thought as a former civil servant, you could give us some insights as to how we can lobby government to fix the problem. Focus on solutions.
You know, I wasn't with government for a very long time. I think I worked for government for maximum.
Well, I mean, for a state town.
Yes. I think it's just a matter of bringing these constraints to the Department of Tourism and showing them a reason why it is important to allow domestic guest houses to venture into these opportunities. One, we know that they will diversify their sources of income and make them sustainable. Because the most important thing that we mustn't forget is that we also create employment for Botswana in a very beautiful way.
That's
so I think, yes, we have to mobilize the society of guest owners to allow domestic guest houses to venture into conferencing, to venture into restaurants and curio shops, because I don't think that will harm anything.
Is there a requirement that the owner of the domestic guest house should reside in the premises?
Oh yes, whilst you're still operating the B&B or the domestic guest house, it's a requirement. But that room where the owner is residing doesn't form part of the 5 rooms that are available.
So it could be maybe a 7th quarters, or what used to be the 7th quarters?
Yes, it could be in one of the 7th quarters.
So what is your setup like? How did you deal with that requirement?
Well, we also have a manager who stays there, but we make it a point that it does not become a nuisance to the guests, because as much as they appreciate us, they also need their space.
And the same manager is managing the same guest house?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any expansion plans in terms of the growth of the guest house? Are you planning to open more, and what's in the pipeline?
Yeah, you see, the guest house business is pretty much seasonal. It's events driven. There are times when occupancies are very low, And then if you have a huge event in Gaborone, you have space constraints. It's very true. We are in the process of increasing our rooms, but remember it has to be legislated, because now we have to apply for what they term commercial guest house, where now you can operate between 6 to 15 rooms. I think really that is very much the plan, the current plan of management, to now go to now migrate to
you have
the
enough
commercial
space for expansion within the area.
Yes, I think we do have open spaces that we can most definitely convert.
Okay.
But of course the challenge remains that sometimes is always, capital is always an issue in our domestic market. But yes, we are planning to expand and create more jobs.
And of course we were hit by COVID those 3 years, 2020 up to 2022. Everybody was hard hit. How were you affected?
We were badly hit. We started operations in November 2019. And if you recall, in December 2019, that's when now stringent measures were introduced.
Well, they came in April 2020. But it was starting.
Yes, it started. Yes, you are very right. It started. Yes, they came in April 2020. But we were so badly hard hit because our business depends on travel. So if you impose a moratorium on travel, you affect the industry. We are badly affected, and we still we haven't fully recovered, but we can see the light at the end of the tunnel.
What is the strategy you used to survive or to maneuver during those tough times?
Well, the strategy really was primarily based on the fact that we were not heavily indebted. I think the capital structure of any business is very, very critical. I would advise Botswana on that. Where possible, don't overly expose your business to debt, because you can come across very difficult situations where you are not able to service your debt. Obviously, my business is debt-free, which is good and bad at the same time, but it helped us because
it's good, obviously, because nobody is going to knock on your door.
Yes.
But it's bad because?
Well, it's bad because it limits your opportunity to expand rapidly. Yes, because sometimes
you are not creditworthy.
No, because sometimes you move fast using other people's money. Yes, like banks.
And as an economist, is there an indication or as to what is the right balance in terms of debt to equity ratio that you would advise Botswana to maybe fall within?
Well, I think really that ratio is normally dependent on the project itself and its ability to generate income. You understand? That means, I think most of the time is influenced by the type of project you are venturing in, because some projects are cash cows, whilst others make money very, very slowly. But I believe that the most important thing is to make sure the business is not heavily geared, although I cannot be very specific because it would differ.
Are there some parameters even when you evaluate a project to say we're getting to dangerous territory there, we're getting to dangerous territory on this percentage when we get from here to here? Are there some pointers or indications?
Well, I believe that as a rule of thumb, but remember this requires one to subject the financials to an analysis, yes, and close scrutiny. But I think a ratio of 60 to 40, 60 equity, 40 loan, in the worst case scenario, it doesn't overburden the business. Yes.
All right. The maximum number of guest rooms you said is 5, and the plan is to get to a bigger number of what?
Well, I think we want to evolve organically, because that's what is also very key. You cannot move from managing, for example, a total of 5 rooms to 50 and 90. Because along the way, you may experience management issues. So I wouldn't advise Botswana to grow exponentially like that, provided they have the resources to bring in the relevant expertise. But the best would be to grow organically. So to answer you directly, I think we would wish to move into a mode of now operating 6 to 15 rooms, but within a very short period of time, because ideally we make money through economies of scale, where if we have more rooms, because remember we make money out of rooms, the more the rooms, the better. Yes.
Now, I want to talk about legislation, relevant legislation that guides this. First of all, Bob's has a role in this, doesn't it? And
Well,
so what is the role?
While Bob plays a major role, you would remember that
the Bureau of Standards.
The Botswana Bureau of Standards, they play a critical role in the sense that we operate according to set standards. You would agree with me that more often than not, sometimes when we are given an opportunity like this one to operate guest houses, our service sometimes is very, very poor. So you see, that's where now Bobs come in to set the minimum standard. Actually, for the domestic guest houses, the requirement is that you are supposed to operate as a 1-star establishment. Anything below 1 star means it's very, very substandard. Yes.
What is the cutoff point? What does 1 star mean?
Although I'm not quite an expert in the field of grading, actually I've been graded only once. But you see, the grading is done to determine the standard and quality of your facility. So where you are way below the set standard, you can attain star 1. You still have your rooms, maybe your beds. The expectation is that your bedding must be in white. Maybe you still say, does it matter? You choose to use bedding of another color. Sometimes you even have toilets that are not working properly. That are things that are considered the cleanliness of the facility. So in the wholesomeness of things, all these things are considered and given a star rating.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, in terms of the grading requirements, for you to go from an ordinary guest house to an executive warehouse, are there any stars involved?
Normally, when we say executive guest house, remember these are the names from the owners of the business. So grading is usually done by the Department of Tourism itself, where they come in grading. Normally, I think it'd be from 0 up to 5 star. Sometimes in other countries it even goes to 7 star. So the most important thing to get through information about the service levels is to look for the grading more than the name we give to our establishment.
Mhm.
Because normally we tend to give high profile names,
Mm.
which of course must be consistent with the grading itself.
Mm. This is why I was asking you whether executive means maybe 5-star or 3-star. But apparently you are saying there's no correlation.
Yes.
It is not a direct one.
It's not a direct, it's implied.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the Tourism Act is important to what you do. What could you highlight a few things about the Act that advantage owners of establishments like yours?
Well, I think, although really I'm not an expert in matters of legislation, but I think that's the act really that guides the development of tourism in the country. And depending on the focus with respect to the establishment in question, whether it's the hotels, whether it's the lodges, or even a campsite out there in the bush.
So does one have to master the Act to be able to successfully set up an establishment such as yours?
Well, normally what the happens is the Department of Tourism, who I believe of late are doing an exceptional job in terms of facilitation. They give you what they call the guidelines of how to set up an establishment of your choice. And then later they can come and inspect the facility, whether it complies with the requirements. And later they license you if you are in line with the set requirements. But even that turnaround time at that time when they were assisting me was very exceptional.
Okay, I'm sure they are listening.
Yes.
They must be very happy about that feedback.
Yes.
BTO Act and its regulations, the BTO Act has to be seen as separate from the Tourism Act?
I must confess, I'm not very quite conversant with some of
but
these
you're saying you don't
acts.
need to know them because you are guided by the
Well, the acts that we take very seriously, normally these acts like video and tourism, they very important in the setup. But you see, the food health is very important because if you come as my guest, I must know the food act that I have to give you food that is hygienically good, and my workers also have to know what it means to provide food that is of high hygiene standards.
And there's so many acts on this which cover this area, and feel free to comment on anything that I share in terms of the various acts. We've talked about the Tourism Act, the BTO Act. Now there's also the Public Health Act.
Yes.
There's the Liquor Act. There's the Smoking Control Act. Town and Country Planning Act. There's the EIA Act. There's the Child Protection Act.
Yes.
So the sense one gets is that maybe this area is over-regulated.
Well, it sounds so, but I think it makes sense. Let's say if it's the Health Act, then because I can sell liquor to my guests, but I have to know the act, the Liquor Act, because let's see if I have a minor coming to the guest house, must I serve the minor with liquor? No, I shouldn't. So I have to be conversant with that. Let's say the environment, the EI Act. We know we do have EIA. I'm sorry.
Environmental Impact Assessment.
Yes, we generate litter as accommodation facilities. We need to know how to handle a litter without necessarily, compromising the health of our visitors. So I believe if you look closely at our smoking acts, smoking is not allowed in the rooms because, it's passive smoking is very, very dangerous. So we also have to protect people who don't smoke in the course of doing our business. So it may look over-regulated, but I believe these are relevant acts for our business.
Yeah. Now, I've heard someone say they don't know this sign that always appears in every establishment, what it means. Right of admission reserved. And here's your chance to teach, Ramon. What does it mean? Because you find it in every establishment, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's a guest house, there's always a right of admission reserved. What does it mean?
As a lawyer, I'm sure you'd fill in where I tend to stumble, but you just my understanding as a layman is that is intended to protect the business against liabilities that are beyond its capability to meet, and therefore some of these messages, I think they are intended to protect, so that when you enter the premises, you have to exercise caution. Like sometimes we even own swimming pools. You know, if a child goes in and drowns in there,
it actually means a lot simpler than that. It just means that the right of admitting Mr. X or Ms. Y is reserved to the owner. In other words, the owner can refuse to allow you in. So the right of admission into these premises is reserved to, it doesn't say to the owner, but that's what it means. It means it's reserved to the owner or to the manager, whoever is in control. They can tell you not to come in.
Yes, thank you.
Because they have the right not to.
Yes, thank you.
But of course, what you have to understand is that such denial has to be lawful. In other words, you cannot be denied contrary to the Constitution because of the color of your skin, etc. But you can be denied if you come stinking, drunk, and a mess.
But to hide.
Yeah.
But to hide in the guest house when law enforcement officers are looking for you and you are aware that is the case.
Yes, that's an example.
No,
so
thank you very much for the enlightenment.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what it means.
Yes.
I'm glad we've been able to share that. You heard it first here, folks, so you're learning from us here in the Nuggets. Now, one would want to know the future in terms of what you have planned. You mentioned the curio shop earlier, but what does the future hold? For instance, if you're going to look at a projection over 10, 15 years for this MMUAS guest house?
We within the CBD where we have big brands like the Marriott. These are hospitality brands from the US. You know, my dream is we must be seeing these guest houses evolving into major international brands in the future, provided we do things right. So my vision for MMUAS Guest House is one, to see it expanding into other places in Botswana, going into the region, and finally becoming an international brand. Because if you look at this tourism industry, you know, people are becoming more and more mobile by the day because we now live in a global village. So really my vision is to grow the brand to those levels.
Wow. And what time frames are we going to have? About 10 of them, aren't
Well, I'm looking at a horizon of 10 years, because if you slow down, the tendency to achieve the strategic objectives is heavily compromised. Because one thing that we often do as Botswana is to quickly go into what I would term a comfort zone. And I think in this area I will learn a lot from you, because coming from the law background, to be a pioneering entrepreneur for me is just out of this world, but in particular out of this country.
Okay.
Yes, I
appreciate that. We appreciate that. You know,
Yes.
the question that I ask you is often youngsters say they don't have access to funding. But as someone who, if they want to grow, for instance, as someone who's an economist and who's worked for extensively for BDC, what advice would you give now, looking back, to young entrepreneurs in terms of access to funding and speeding up the process of such access?
The truth is, banks and financial institutions exist to create value and make profit. It's inconceivable to think that if you come up with what they call a bankable business proposal that clearly churns out money, financiers can refuse that. So what I want to advise young entrepreneurs is to come up with businesses or business proposals that do more talking than themselves. And it usually starts with doing a very good market research. You know, you must come up with a project that aims to meet an existing demand. Because if there is an existing demand, then there is a market, rather than to just copy what other colleagues are doing because they're succeeding with a particular business, then you replicate it. Because this is very often seen on Botswana business landscapes. You know, I'm doing well with my small before you know it, I have about 10 or 15 of them around me, and then we have to share that little piece of cake that becomes available to the industry. So I'd just tell them that there is no substitute for a well-researched business plan that makes financial, economic, and social sense. Because sometimes we tend to emphasize the social aspects when financiers are interested first on the financial returns, ability to pay off your loans more than how it will help society. How it helps society is a secondary objective.
Yeah, because the question that arises from what you said is define a bankable proposal. If a youngster is really just saying, look, what really constitutes a bankable proposal that will speak for itself as opposed to speaking on its behalf?
A bankable business proposal simply means, obviously, to determine profitability in its lowest denominator is where you say revenue take away costs, and then what you get is profit. So avoid situations where cost is higher than the revenue you are going to make from the business proposal. Actually, where costs are at the lowest and the revenue is maximized, you tend to find that those are bankable business projects, because even when you subject the proposal to financial ratios, now where you become detailed, they will still be able to stand the test of time. Mm-hmm. So make sure that at any point in time, you generate more revenue than cost. So the emphasis really here is try to minimize costs as far as possible, but without necessarily compromising the value of the product you make available to the clientele.
I've seen quite often rookie entrepreneurs, some of the young entrepreneurs going to consultants and asking them to come up with business proposals or business plans, and relying entirely on what they've come up with. What is your advice about the tendency to rely on consultants as opposed to you getting to the numbers yourself and presenting?
Most of our young entrepreneurs, they want money and throw it at projects. I'm happy you are raising this very critical point. The most important thing is, to appreciate the project, to do the business plan with the business consultant, so that there is buy-in and full understanding of the business plan itself. Because if you are not part of the business plan, once the business consultant disappears, you are a stranger to your own business, because you never internalize the business proposal. So I would ask the young entrepreneurs to immerse themselves and understand fully their business proposition.
Yeah. Are you able to give examples of in your history, having evaluated so many deals, where a failure to do what you advise had a certain consequence? Are you able to strengthen your argument with examples?
Well,
without mentioning names.
Without mentioning names, I believe more often than not, we do business and we easily get excited, and the excitement normally results in misappropriation of business funds, where now we cannot draw the line between personal money and money for business. And in the final process, you cripple the business because it fails to pay for its obligations. So I would very much argue for financial discipline. It's very, very critical, because without financial discipline, you will render good projects non-viable. And then before you know it, the hammerman is already up with you, and winding up the business. So as I advise young entrepreneurs to exercise restraint.
What have you seen that causes you to give this advice? I need examples, practical ones.
Or whatever. Well, we have seen good businesses going under, not because they cannot generate enough revenue to sustain themselves, but because people tend to depend on them for their own daily living.
It becomes a lifestyle business.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, but I thought you strengthen your argument with examples, but you seem...
Well, I just want to pass it on as a principle, more than, but I think the majority of the people really, actually, some even feel self-guilt, because that's what most of us find ourselves doing.
What do you do? Is it just the Range Rover situation, where you get a entrepreneur who is given a mobilization and he goes to Red Dada and buys a Range Rover?
Yes, we do. We have those pseudo entrepreneurs, because I don't think a genuine entrepreneur does that, who engage in this conspicuous consumption. Now they become the project before the project itself. Whereas if you look after the project over time, it will generate enough funds to enable you to live the kind of lifestyle you want to live. So really, we must discourage the youth from this style of, conspicuous consumption, because you and I know that where consumption is higher than investment, before long you go under
Mm.
because everything becomes unsustainable.
That's very true. All right, I want us to just, as we head towards the close, to go back to your business itself. You say that you are reasonably priced. What do you mean?
Well, I think reasonably priced, I was just talking to the aspect of running a domestic guest house.
Mm-hmm.
What we really mean there is that guest houses would tend to be cheaper than large establishments because of the size issues. Obviously, if you are running a small establishment, it means your costs can be contained quite easily, especially in this business because we do have we can have very large fixed costs. You know, when you come to my guest house, you expect to find water.
The biggest one of which is electricity.
DPC
rates are.
And then Wi-Fi, whether I have guests or I don't have guests, you want to find the Wi-Fi running, etc. So yes, we do have these costs, but the argument here is with the guest house business, we tend to focus on budget, on budget accommodation than very luxurious accommodation prices.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. I suppose you are concerned that marketing is a problem, and we spoke about this earlier. What about marketing are you concerned about? Marketing and of establishments such as yours?
Well, marketing has a cost. And then you
Is it one of the biggest challenges?
It's one of the biggest challenges, of course. And I'm quite happy because you are providing, by the very nature of this interview, you are providing a relief in that area, because you find that guest houses don't generate enough income to fund their marketing budgets because of the sheer size of the operations. This does not mean that marketing is not important, but of course with digital marketing things are much better because you can achieve more with less money.
But in what way is it a challenge for you when you say that it's much better now?
Well, marketing is a very expensive undertaking, and
depends how you do it. You go to radio, you go to TV, that's going to cost you. But social media, not as much.
No, very true. That's why I'm saying at least digital marketing it has helped a great deal. But conventional marketing, where you do your advertising, but you still have to reach out. What I have come to discover, you still have to reach out to your clientele out there through various means. But yes, marketing is critical, and yes, it can be heavy for us, especially in this time where we're still coming out slowly out of the effects of COVID.
Okay. Any other challenges you wish to share as we wrap up?
Well, I think some of the challenges is that I think the current feeling is that, especially domestic guest house business, I feel they're oversubscribed. I believe the regulators must look into that, because if there is oversubscription or oversupply, it may result in...
Won't the competition sort itself out? Doesn't
yes,
normally result?
It results in that cannibalization, which I believe is already happening, but it can be...
You call it cannibalization. Is it that bad?
No, see, I'm a proponent of of free market economy. But we are saying, we don't want to see Botswana get licenses in situations where, in the end, they don't make it and lose their last money. Yes, so I think we need a balance, even while we allow the free forces of the market to operate.
All right, this is the time on the show when you get to ask me a question. Go ahead, Mr. MMualefe.
Yes, I want you to give us some insights into how you have managed to make it to this level.
All right, I can say it in two words. One is grit, and that word grit is made up of persistence, perseverance, and resilience. And your question tells me that there's a big market for my book, which is I'm on the verge of completing, where I really open up and share the nuts and bolts of my entrepreneurial energy journey. So for me not to spoil it for you and the viewers, allow me not to go into detail. But in previous podcasts I've touched on it basically. But grit is the main thing, and then faith as well. It helps to have faith. Faith can be defined in terms of faith in believing one can do it, and faith in believing that there's a higher power that will help you achieve your objectives. So I think that's as far as I'm willing to go now.
Wow, this is impacting positively. As a manager of some business, to really incorporate those elements. Now we also, which is a very peculiar setup. What would be your comment on the so-called PhD syndrome in Botswana? Is it prevalent? Pull your head down.
Well, there is a degree to which that is relevant and prevalent. But when we talk to our parents, they will tell you that lihuha la petu le lentswe me lentswe ne la nyara la buja me lihuha lona la sala. So it means that it's a trait that is there and has always been there. And in terms of tsele, which is what pulling down syndrome is about, we have a word for it. It's called tsele. And I've heard Remo Mahan call it Chutwana. To say about it. The reason why we have a Chutwana, but I haven't interrogated it enough to see whether we all should be on a psychiatrist's couch to see how we can take out this tele thing from us. But I can tell you that it's there because it kills a lot of projects, it kills a lot of initiatives. For instance, even the latest, which I'm very excited about, the presidential reset effort, maybe facing some of these headwinds. But I noticed that the president in his speech when he launched it, he recognized that we have this problem and that we should do something about it. So I touch on it in my book also, so I will not go beyond that.
Thank you. It also talks to the perseverance.
Yes.
We're talking about.
Yes.
Looking at things from the brighter side.
Indeed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But not ignoring them, recognizing that it's there, but moving ahead nonetheless.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you say a few words to motivate our viewers as we conclude? Words of wisdom, words of encouragement.
No, thank you very much for the opportunity again, Mogobe. I really want to encourage Botswana to get into business, but it requires seriousness and dedication. It is not without challenges, but it is something worth doing. Again, I believe as we can study or learn from other societies amongst us, to strive to replicate what I would term family businesses, because that's one of the models that I realize is working for many around the world. I know we also have issues relating to raising money or capital for our various businesses, and partly because we don't generate viable business proposals. I would also encourage Botswana to work with business consultants in that regard. And as a parting shot, we also need an indigenous bank. Forgive my word indigenous if it offends some, or a domestic homegrown bank that would definitely deal with financing according to the situation of Botswana, but without necessarily moving out of the standard business guidelines for lending. Thank you very much.
Excellent, excellent. Share with them all your contacts, the location of the lodge, and all your contacts on social media and everywhere else.
I'm here representing MMUAS Suites Executive Guest House. This guest house is located within the Grand Millennium Estate, which lies between Malapo Crossing and Jeeps in Gaborone. And I must thank many of my guests who have supported me since the establishment of this business. We are on plot 39379 Gaborone. We believe in the concept of value for money. We know you make money the difficult way. We thrive to make you happy. We thrive to assist or make you get value for your money when you visit your house. We are more than ready to welcome you. Please visit us. Thank you.
Cell phone number, contact number?
Our contact numbers are 713-06472, 713-06472, and 73-64-64-64, which is much easier. Our landline is 3924384. Our Facebook page is MMUAS Suites Executive Guest House. Please find time in your busy schedule to visit it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.